This year's U.S. Open has definitely been a historic one, and I'm joined by the director of a new documentary about a tennis icon. No, I'm not talking about Serena Williams, but McEnroe, John McEnroe to be exact. And Barney Douglas is joining us right now from the UK. Barney, welcome to the Sami Cone Show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be on.
I'm thrilled. I'm a former tennis pro myself, and I think tennis fans and non-tennis fans alike have been glued to Flushing Meadows because of what I said to be a historic year for the U.S. Open. Why now have you decided to give this intimate look into John McEnroe with some of this never-before-seen footage and insights?
Well, I think the opportunity to tell John's story came up a couple of years ago. So obviously, had to grab that opportunity with one of the icons of the game and an American icon as well. And obviously to release it around the US Open is perfect because the eyes of the world are on New York, the eyes of the world are on tennis. And as we know, McEnroe is such a big name even now in the sport. So hopefully a lot of the tennis fans will tune into the documentary as well.
Absolutely. Now, I think we all believe we know who John McEnroe is, but just the opening hook of your documentary grabbed me because we're getting an insight into his, I don't want to say mental dilemmas, personal quirks, hearing from people like Heath Richards and his wife, Patti Smythe, Billie Jean King. How were you able to really dig so deep with this story?
Well, firstly, I think that was the point of making the film, wasn't it? We needed to hear more from John about what went on inside his head rather than obviously just on the court. So that gave us a fresh new angle on this film. And I think just building trust with John. I think he's such an authentic person, for better or worse sometimes. And, he can't help but go there. That being said, he needs to trust you. And I think we built that over a long period of time, lots of Zoom calls, lots of conversations, and just really wanted to dig deep and really understand what made John tick. And I think we do that to a level that's never been seen before, I don't think.
We have such a level of access, especially to our sports heroes, that we've never had before. That access didn't exist when John was really in his heyday in the late 70s and early 80s. Do you think that helped him or hurt him, would you say?
Good question. I think, mental health and the pressures on elite sportsmen is sort of, I think, better documented now. Back then, I don't think it was at all. I think John kind of didn't really understand, I think, a lot of the pressures that he was under himself and why occasionally he broke under that pressure. So I do think there were a lot of challenges for him, but also his temperament, his own brain, the way that worked, the way that saw the world, made it difficult for him to connect with others. And I think that certainly comes out in the documentary. But it is good now that we're starting to understand better that these pressures really do take a toll on players.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think it's more important now than ever to be transparent in that. And so for him to be very frank about the role his father played in his upbringing, about he had to be the best. He said if you wanted a perfectionist home, look no further than the home he grew up in. Even, I think it was his wife saying that he may be, on the spectrum to a degree and looking at the chess moves that he saw in his head. What do you think John has learned? What would John say if there was one takeaway from who he was on court to who he has come to know himself as now?
I mean, I think that's a really good question. I think for John, the making of the film was a learning process. I think things were coming out that he was talking about that I don't think he'd ever really considered, in particular, as you mentioned, the relationship with his father. And that was really built on the way they found a connection was success, his success on the court. I mean, if he didn't get it, he really struggled with that relationship. I think what he's taken away from this whole process is to not make the same mistakes with his own kids, really. He doesn't blame his father for anything. They had there was a loving relationship to a point, but they expressed it through success. They expressed it through achievement. And I think what he's learned with his own kids is to perhaps not do the same thing and to try and just be there as a compassionate father and get real loving connections with people, not based on maybe what your achievements are.
I was going to ask you, what do you hope tennis fans and non-tennis fans will take away? But I think you just said it right there. It's a universal message. Is there anything else that you hope people will walk away from this, in a way as a love letter that you created, really?
Oh, that's really, really kind. I think for me, just a bit of compassion and a more empathetic view of McEnroe and understanding perhaps him a little better. I think sometimes, certainly throughout his life, he has been misunderstood, and sometimes that's his own fault. But like, I do think a bit more compassion for him, I think, would be interesting. And also just, that success and everything isn't the be all and end all. It's actually the connections we make along the way. And I think, I think those are the kind of messages that the film throws up.
So well said. Barney Douglas, thank you for joining us. You can stream McEnroe, the documentary, on Showtime now. Of course, the finale of the U.S. Open is coming up as well. Barney, thank you so much for joining us today.